Ladies and gentlemen, the One Piece manga just dropped an absolute bombshell on us, and I mean a huge bombshell. If you are not caught up with the manga, now is your chance to step away from this video. Take a look at this. That's right, this panel in chapter 1138 has sent the fandom spiraling into theories, discussion, arguments, everything pertaining to the history of the world that Oda has just revealed to us in front of our eyes. There is so much to unpack just about this one panel alone, not even including the whole chapter, which had a whole plethora of new information about Shanks and his brother. But in this video, we're going to be doing a comprehensive breakdown of this weird cave painting that Frankie found, and also, more importantly, the Harley Texts that Robin is reading, which contain a treasure trove of information about the future of One Piece and the past of the story. But first, if you want to stay updated as Elbaf continues to drop these incredible lore dumps, be sure to subscribe. And while you're down there, leave a comment on what you think all of this stuff in this chapter means. I'm really curious to hear what everyone thinks about these incredible lore drops because I feel like there's a ton of interpretations to all of this information. So firstly, getting started, the most important thing in this chapter is the Harley text that Robin's reading, the books that are pasted above the mural that Frankie is looking at. Before we get to those and attempt to break down what they're telling us, I want to try and label everything in the picture that Frankie is looking at. I don't think labeling everything in this picture is as important as interpreting what the texts say, but I think it'd be pretty cool to understand what exactly we're looking at because then it provides a little bit more perspective to what the books are telling us. So let's take a look at this incredible panel that Oda drew. So, as we know from the giants that are escorting Frankie to the Atom Tree, this was drawn by a child during the Void Century. We're not sure if it's a depiction of history texts from a long time ago that the child read during the Void Century, or what was happening in the Void Century, or perhaps it's just a child's dream like Ripley says. The only thing that matters is that we have this panel now, we have things to interpret and discuss based on what is on the page. So let's do exactly that. What exactly are we looking at? Well, I think it's safe to say, like Ripley says, this is some kind of combined force of different races around the world taking on this extreme evil that is depicted in these black devilish beasts in this painting. Of course, as we know, we are waiting on Oda to draw the final war of the story, which is supposed to mirror the war that happened in the Void Century, so I think that's exactly what we're looking at here. Whether or not it is the first instance or the second instance of this war happening, like I said, this could be far before the Void Century, I am not sure, but there is clearly parallels as to what is happening in the real world of One Piece in this painting, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about. So first, the most glaring thing in this picture is obviously these giant black beasts. The easiest interpretation is that this is Emu and Emu's forces. I think there could possibly be different interpretations of what each individual beast is, but for now I think it's safe to say that those are the villains. This giant snake type thing, this bird type thing in the middle, and I don't even know what that is on the left, but the creature holding the sun are all clearly reminiscent of the Gorosei and Emu and their kind of mysterious beast-like devil powers. So it is clear to me that these are the antagonists, the villains, Emu, whatever you want to call them, in this painting. And that leaves everybody else in the painting to be the good guys, the people fighting against these magical beasts. But who are these good guys? I actually think there's a lot of correct labels we can put on the figures in this painting, and not many actually go unnamed. So to keep it chronological, we're going to go from the right side of the painting all the way to the left and see how many things that we can name. The first being this city-looking landscape with these citizens carrying up what looks like mini suns or mini lights up to the city. My interpretation of this is that this is the ancient kingdom that we know and love, or some type of ancient kingdom before the ancient kingdom that we know from O'Hara's research. The reason for this is that because of Vegapunk's research, we know that the ancient kingdom was technologically advanced more so than the current One Piece world, and that's exactly what this city looks like. There's gears, there's smoke, it's reminiscent of a factory, there's this weird lift carrying people who are carrying energy sources. I think this is depicting a very technologically advanced civilization, and that is exactly what the Ancient Kingdom was. So I think this is the Ancient Kingdom or an Ancient Kingdom. As for what these people are carrying, we also know that the Ancient Kingdom had a renewable energy source, and that was the reason for their technological advancements. That is exactly what Vegapunk was trying to recreate in Egghead Island. He was trying to mirror the Ancient Kingdom in creating a renewable energy source for the entire world. Because these citizens look like they're carrying something that looks like a sun, I don't think it's a stretch to say that this is the mother flame of the ancient times, or whatever the mother flame in the ancient times was that Vegabug was trying to recreate. As for what this means, I'm going to hold off on my explanation until we get to the Harley Texts in the books pasted above the photo. For now, we're just going to continue to label what we see. As we move to the left, we see a lot of things that we find recognizable, the first being Zoe and the Noah. This is of no surprise to me, considering the Noah was prophesied to save the people from Fishman Island and bring them to the surface in the event of a catastrophe, and this photo is nothing but a catastrophe. And we also know that Zoe was a companion of Joy Boy, who, sorry for jumping the gun, but is very obviously in this painting, so I am not surprised to see either of these in this photo. Underneath Zoe and the Noah, there's also some animals. Now, I'm not sure if this is referring to the literal Noah's Ark in human history about how animals were brought onto the Noah's Ark to preserve them as the world flooded, or if this is just meant to show us that Zoe is the kingdom of the Minks, and the Minks were part of Zoe all the way back in the ancient times. Regardless, I think it's important to realize that there are animals depicted right next to Zoe. Moving up from where Zoe is, you can see what looks like the Arc Maxim from Skypiea. Now, I don't think this is the actual Arc Maxim that Enel created. I think this is actually Uranus, the ancient weapon. My reason for saying that is that this is a flying device that is shooting a beam from the ground. Uranus has synonymous meanings with the sky. We saw Evu use what we anticipate to be Uranus from the sky above an island. So I think it is safe to say that this is the first ancient weapon being depicted in this painting. It's also worth mentioning that Skypiea had a ton of lore drops about the history of the world. I don't think it's any coincidence that Enel had some kind of Uranus of his own. There's so many parallels between the Ancient Kingdom and Skypiea Kingdom Shandora. And maybe this even means Enel could be potentially coming back into the story, but for now, I'm just going to label this weird flying device as Uranus. Now, skipping over Frankie and instead focusing on this tree, I really am lost as to what this tree could potentially mean. The only thing that came to my mind is that it is meant to represent Elbaf. Obviously, we know the kingdom of Elbaf is literally the giant treasure tree Adam, and if a child on Elbaf drew this picture, they obviously would want to put their hometown in the photo, and maybe it symbolizes that Elbaf was in the middle of this conflict the entire time, considering Elbaf was the nation of war, and this is a giant depiction of war. Moving to the left again, we start to get to what seems to be the companions of Joy Boy, the allies who are helping the lead of this war take on whatever forces they are fighting. We can immediately see what looks like Wano citizens, or some kind of samurai folk, sailing to help Joy Boy, and we know that Wano awaited the return of Joy Boy all this time, so I think this is the citizens of Wano aiming to help Joy Boy in his war. The ship above this one also has a strange flag that sort of looks like the land of Wano, but it also looks like the same geography as Whole Cake Island. Regardless, I think this is just either the Wano nation or a different nation coming to Joy Boy's aid to defeat whatever evil they are fighting against. Like Ripley said in the beginning of the chapter, the collaboration of this magnitude was never seen in the One Piece world before, so there are probably tons of nations coming to the aid of Joy Boy. And now we get to the individual characters. Let's look at this robot and this giant light creature to the left. I think it is pretty clear that this is Emyth or something similar to Emyth, which is the robot we saw in Egghead Island, and also the first Oars number 1, coming to Joy Boy's aid. There have been plenty of mentions of Oars throughout One Piece and his legendary lineage. It does not surprise me that the original Oars, or at least someone deep down in that heritage, was on Joy Boy's side and trying to liberate the world. And also, Emyth is just a give-me. We literally saw the robot from the Void Century in the last arc interact with Luffy and say that he reminded him of Joy Boy, so this is very obviously Emyth, or something from Emyth's heritage. Directly to the left of those two, this one's just a give-me as well. This is Nika, Joy Boy, all the names we know and love. Again, if this is the original Nika, or if this is Joy Boy with the Nika fruit, it is unclear, but we all know and love this figure. We've seen him throughout the story many times already, so this one's pretty obvious. And right below Nika, we have the Mermaid Queen. This is very obviously the Shirahoshi of this time. I think it's quite obvious that Shirahoshi has gigantic lore implications for the story, and I think there's actually a lot to be said about Shirahoshi after we dive into the Harley Texts later in this video, but for now, we're just going to label that this is obviously the Mermaid Princess that commands the Sea Kings. Right above Nika, we have what looks like a Lunarian, which definitely makes sense because when the top of the Red Line was occupied by these evil forces that are also being depicted in this photo, they kicked the Lunarians out of their home. So it makes sense that the original Lunarians were on the side of Joy Boy to help fight for freedom. And lastly, this monster on the left, I know we said that they are just the villains being depicted in this photo. But the fact that this character is holding the sun, I think is very important, because when we get to the Harley Texts later in the video, there's a lot of mentions of upper, higher powers or devils stealing the sun from enslaved people. So just keep in mind that the sun that is being mentioned in these texts likely refers to this sun that is being stolen away from the people, which is being shown in this photo. That leaves us with a handful of characters that I cannot identify in this photo, and if you think you know who they are, please comment below. First is this mysterious queen standing on top of Zoe. I'm not sure if this is supposed to be whoever was commanding Zoe to help Joy Boy, or it is the mink king or queen, but I just could not figure out a parallel as to who this character was when you think about the main story of One Piece. And the same goes for a few of the warriors here on the left in Joy Boy's kind of entourage. I couldn't think of any characters in the current story that parallel anything that looks like these. Obviously they are meant to be allies of Joy Boy, but they seriously don't look like anyone in the current One Piece story. So if you can put these puzzle pieces together, feel free to let me know. I am eager to find out what Oda was trying to tell us here. Now, before we move on to the Harley Texts, which are the main purpose of this video, I also want to mention something that a Reddit user found that I thought was very interesting pertaining to the ancient weapons. In this mural, there are two depictions of ancient weapons. Obviously, one is Uranus above Zoe, and the other one is Poseidon, the mermaid queen who can control the Sea Kings. But where is Pluton depicted in this photo? If Pluton is a giant battleship, surely it would have an impact on the war, and the child drawing this mural would depict it. Well, it's actually Franky, the one person in the One Piece universe who memorized the blueprints to Pluton and has access to that weapon is Franky. He is meant to be the third ancient weapon depicted in this photo, which I think is the exact reason why Oda had Franky be the one to find this mural. Franky doesn't exactly care about the lore of the world. That's more in the realm of Robin, so why would Oda have Franky of all people find this gigantic lore dump? It's because he himself is an ancient weapon, and by standing and looking at this photo, he is literally being depicted in the photo as well. He is the third ancient weapon in this mural. So, now that we applied labels to everything in this mural, it is time to get to the Harley Texts. These tell the story of the complete One Piece planet, pretty much spelling out exactly what has happened in the past of the story and what will happen in the end of One Piece. These are incredibly valuable details that Oda has shared with us, and there is so much to siphon from these words, so that's what the remainder of this video is going to be, and I promise you, there is a lot to talk about. So first is the structure of these books. It is said that the third world, which is the last book we're going to go over, is the current One Piece world, things that have not happened yet that are sort of prophesized to happen by the end of the story. The second world is meant to be right before the current world of One Piece, right around the Void Century, about 800 to 900 years ago, and the first world is an undisclosed amount of time before the Void Century, very, very old in One Piece history, where everything started. So, going in chronological order, we're going to start with what is depicted as the first world. The earth burned in endless flame, and the hearts of men burned with desire. I think this is pretty simple. We're just establishing at the very start of it all, the beginning of the One Piece world, there was chaos. There was probably no order, people were miserable, there was probably a literal world on fire. I'm not sure exactly what Oda is trying to tell us, other than the fact that the One Piece world at the very start was a hellscape. And the reason I'm so confident in that is the next line. From whispered prayers, the sun god rose, beckoned by the enslaved who reach for the forbidden star. I think this stanza alone might be the most telling out of everything in these three books. And the reason I say that is because it's sort of a recurring theme in One Piece about slaves who pray to the sun god for liberation, and that seems exactly how the world started based on this stanza. From whispered prayers, the sun god rose sort of implies that there's a group of people who are whispering prayers as to not get found out by an authority figure or are hiding from an authority figure, praying for salvation from the sun god. And those people who are whispering those prayers are enslaved and are reaching for the forbidden star. My interpretation of the first half of the First World book comes from these stanzas alone. I think this probably means that at the beginning of the One Piece world, there was some kind of authority figure keeping people down, enslaved, and was hoarding a massive energy source to themselves, which is the Forbidden Star, and in the current One Piece world is the Mother Flame. This character, whether it was Imu all the way back then or whoever preceded Imu, was holding the energy source to themselves, which resulted in these slaves praying for liberation from the sun god, because everything in the world was being hoarded by this one character who was holding the energy source to themselves. As for who this mysterious character who is holding this forbidden star was, I think that comes in the next line, which is, the god of the land was enraged. I don't think this is a literal god of the earth, similar to how Luffy's the sun god. I think the god of the land literally means this authority figure that these slaves are worried about, causing them to whisper these prayers of liberation to the sun god. This god of the land is literally putting themselves in the position of God, holding this forbidden star as the energy source, and again pushing these people down. With a serpent of fire, they cast the world into ruin. Darkness fell, death reigned, they would not meet again. This is a pretty interesting one, and although it's not my original idea, many have discussed that this serpent of fire is the red line being put into the One Piece world, casting the world into ruin and into death and darkness by separating all the people of the world with a literal giant red line of concrete, which is being described as a serpent in this book. I think this also goes along with the last line of the First World book, they will not meet. It kind of makes sense that this mysterious god, who is mad at these slaves for praying for liberation, is separating all of these people with a giant red line because they're being punished. This god figure is punishing these people by separating them across the world so that they can never rebel against this godlike figure. So, to recap for the first book, the One Piece world started in an absolute hellscape. The only energy source in the entire world was being hoarded by a godlike figure, and those who were enslaved by that godlike figure and not granted access to this energy source prayed for liberation from the sun god. That godlike figure got very mad at them, punished them by separating the world by a giant red line so that these characters could never rebel or pray against the god again. Now we move on to book number 2, which is said to be close to the Void Century. A breath stirred in the abyss. The god of the forest wove their magic, nurturing its devils. When I first saw God of the Forest, I immediately thought of someone who might be a good character because the God of the Forest often in fiction is depicted as some kind of healing character. Nature is often depicted as a good, kind of very morally just source of power. However, my opinion was changed when I saw nurturing their devils. I think the first part of book number 2 is pointing towards this godlike figure when they put everyone down and separated the world with the red line, is nurturing their own ideal world, which is a world filled with devils. And I think this is reinforced by the next line, while the sun lit the embers of war, those of the half moon and full moons dreamed. I think the sun lighting the embers of war is very obviously referring to the people who lived the god's wrath when the gods separated the world. In the first book, these people are still praying to the sun god, which is lighting the embers of war because these people want to rebel and take back their world. Those embers of war are the literal prayers of these people praying to the sun god for liberation so that they can get their world back from this evil god. Now, I think right after this line is exactly where the events in the mural are taking place. The embers of war sparked by the sun god caused the creation of the ancient kingdom with all of those races to rebel against the god of the world in order to take back what was originally theirs. In doing so, the ancient war was started by Joy Boy and his companions, and they fought against Emu and what would eventually become the world government, and eventually lost. Then we get to this line about those of the half moon and full moon dreamed. Now there is so many groups of characters that these moons could be referring to. The first and most obvious one is the Lunarians. If I'm correct about the Serpent of Fire being the red line that the god used to separate the world, it would make sense that one of these moon races is the Lunarians because the Lunarians lived on top of the red line. Perhaps these moon-like races like the Lunarians are on the top of the red line, dreaming of a time where that red line would disappear and the sun god would come to save them because the world is separated in peril because of this god. However, I think it's important to mention that half moon and full moon are being separated here, so I think they are two separate races. So if we assume that the full moon tribe is the Lunarians, who is the half moon tribe? My first guess could be the citizens of Wano. We know the half moon or the crescent moon was a very prominent symbol in the Wano arc, and the citizens of Wano were allies of Joy Boy and existed very ancient into the world, so perhaps these people are also dreaming of the return of the sun god to help come liberate them from this god. This could also be referring to the race that lived on the ancient kingdom, the Buccaneers. The only connection that the Buccaneers have to the moon this far into the story is that Blackbeard is likely of the Buccaneer tribe, considering Saturn comments on his lineage in Egghead Island. And Blackbeard is very commonly attributed with the moon because Blackbeard cannot sleep, and even in this little drawing that Oda made of Blackbeard as a kid, the moon is right there with him. We're then followed up with, the ones who slew the sun defied themselves, evoking the wrath of the sea god. They would not meet again. The end of book 2 here might be the most challenging to interpret because we're not exactly sure what it means by slew the sun god and the sea god. My interpretation of this is that those who put down the sun god and separated the world, which is again this all-powerful god who is hoarding an energy source and separated the world, evoked the wrath of the sea god who was on the side of the sun god and were both trying to help liberate the world. We also see the line, "they would not meet again," in this book as well. Now I think the inclusion of the sea god right before this line, "they would not meet again," is very important because we know that Luffy and Shirahoshi together are part of this giant prophecy of the sun god, which becomes even more prominent in book number 3. Let me explain book number 3 and then you'll understand what I mean. Chaos reigns, the world drifts in a void, yet time does not erase the memory of the promised day. This is meant to be after the Void Century, as this mysterious god again has maintained control of the world, all of the rebellions have been snuffed out, Nika again has been defeated, all that is left is prayers and memories of people wishing for the sun god to liberate them on the promised day. This is very reminiscent of the current One Piece world, where a lot of characters are waiting for the dawn, they're waiting for the liberation of the world, and they know that the world is coming to this grand war where this evil will finally be defeated. Its shadow looms as the voice of the half moon echoes through the ages, and once more the sun god shall rise, laughing, dancing, guiding the world to its final act. Now first, the half moon echoes through the ages. The only thing I could think of again is that this is the same half moon tribe being mentioned in the second book, and these people, who know that the sun god is prophesied to come back and liberate the world, are echoing the stories of the past, waiting for the current sun god to come liberate them. However, I really couldn't unravel what this half moon echoing really meant, so I'll leave this one to you guys. Let me know what you think about this sentence. As for the next line, it's pretty obvious. They're waiting for the next rendition of the sun god to come and actually succeed in liberating them, as the first two failed against this almighty god, and when he does come back, he'll be laughing and dancing, as we know Nika does. The sun is reborn, a new dawn will break, surely this time they will meet. Obviously, this means the end of One Piece. We all have known for a very long time that Luffy will bring the dawn to the world. So many characters have said it. Pedro, Roger, Whitebeard. So many characters have foreshadowed this coming of the dawn at the end of the story. I think the last part of book number 3 very clearly just depicts this final war we've been waiting for, where Luffy defeats Imu and liberates the world. Now, surely this time they will meet. This is something that has been thematic throughout all 3 books, where it says they will not meet, and surely they will meet. Now, like I said before, when we finish book 3, you'll understand what I mean. I think the characters meeting in question here are Luffy and Shirahoshi. During the Oden flashback, we get some very unique dialogue from the Sea Kings about awaiting the birth of Shirahoshi, and surely this time Shirahoshi will do what she's prophesied to do and meet the right character to do so. If Shirahoshi is this wrathful sea god being mentioned in book number 2, who is wrathful because Joy Boy has been defeated and they could not meet Joy Boy to liberate the world, I think it makes sense that surely they will meet this time refers to Luffy and Shirahoshi finally, after all this time of being separated because of this evil god, are going to be able to meet each other, use the power of the ancient weapons together to liberate the world and defeat this god. I think this also checks out at the Sea King's reaction to Luffy being able to hear their voices in Fishman Island. You can see the reaction of the Sea Kings is that this couldn't possibly be him, right? The Sea Kings and the Sea God have been waiting for generations for Luffy, Joy Boy, the next coming of the Sun God, to successfully meet Shirahoshi in order to liberate the world, and this meeting, as we see in the previous 2 books, has failed repetitively because of the interference of this almighty god. I think there's a good chance the reason Joy Boy lost in the Void Century against this evil god was because he failed to do exactly this. We know Joy Boy wrote an apology letter on a poneglyph to the people of Fishman Island, and I think it's possible the contents of that letter are apologizing for not meeting the Mermaid Queen of that era, which resulted in him losing against Imu. Of course, we know that Luffy and Shirahoshi have already met. Obviously, those two are very ignorant as to what their roles will be come the final war, but I think it's very obvious that once they understand what they have to do, once Luffy finds the One Piece and gains access to all 3 ancient weapons, the fact that Luffy and Shirahoshi finally get to meet each other as Joy Boy and the Sovereign for the first time in the history of the world means that finally this almighty god who has been ruling the world, dividing the world with the red line, and holding this infinite energy source from the rest of the world will finally be defeated by Joy Boy, aka Luffy. So, I know we've been going for a while, but let's put it all together now in one short summary. When the One Piece world started, there was this almighty god who had this infinite energy source. They did not share this energy source with anyone. They kept these people as slaves, and as a result, those slaves prayed to the sun god. The evil god got very angry, punished these people who were praying by dividing the world with the red line, separating these people all across the world so that they could not pray together against the god. The god now lives in this perfect world, so they decide to nurture their world, create their perfect world pretty much, and nurture these devils. While this is happening, there are still people all across the world, including the people living on top of this new red line, like the Lunarians, praying for the return of the sun god to come one day. Another person who is praying for the return of the sun god and is actually mad that they did not get to meet the sun god and defeat this evil god is the sea god, aka whoever is Shirahoshi's ancestor. Eventually, all these people who are praying for the return of the sun god end up creating an ancient kingdom, gathering their forces, and trying to attack this evil god. This is the ancient war and the ancient kingdom with Joy Boy and Lily that we have known for a while now. Obviously, we know that these people lost the war, the Void Century happened, and Emu and the world government ended on top. Now we enter the current day of One Piece, where still there are plenty of people who pray for the return of the sun god and the liberation of the world. That sun god is obviously Luffy, who will bring the dawn of the world, and he will do that by this time successfully meeting the sea god Shirahoshi, who Joy Boy had failed to meet plenty times in the past, which is why the god never lost. And this time, together with the power of the One Piece, the ancient weapons, and Luffy as Joy Boy, they will defeat Emu, and the world will be ushered into a new dawn. So, there you have it. I know that was a lot to sift through, including the mural that Frankie saw and all the Harley texts. There is so much to talk about that just what I said in this video is sort of barely scratching the surface as to what the actual full story of the ancient world of One Piece is. So, make sure to leave a comment if you agree with everything I just said, if you have a different interpretation of all the things revealed in this chapter, and while you're down there, why not like and subscribe? I'm going to be covering the rest of Elbaf like it's a hot topic news story if we continue to get lore reveals like this. And if you want to hop on the train and join me as we do that, feel free to do so. We'd love to have you. And I'd love to hear everything you guys have to say about this chapter and future chapters as they drop in Elbaf. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.